A single Boeing F/A-18 Super Hornet represents a $70 million allocation of national treasure sitting on a pitching deck. When fully loaded for a strike mission, this precision instrument transforms into a 32,000-pound pendulum waiting for gravity to intervene. Multiply that mass by 64 airframes, and you have $4 billion of combat capability exposed to the open elements. This is not merely a parking lot. It is a high-density industrial airfield operating in the most hostile environments on Earth. The variable that threatens this investment is not always an enemy anti-ship missile, but the sheer kinetic energy of the atmosphere. In July 2022, the calculus of risk turned catastrophic aboard the USS Harry S. Truman in the Mediterranean Sea. A sudden, violent squall battered the carrier during a replenishment operation, creating a scenario of compound instability. One Super Hornet, improperly secured against the sudden heave of the deck, broke its static friction and became a projectile. The aircraft plunged 9,500 feet into the abyss, turning a capital asset into deep-sea debris in seconds. This incident underscores a brutal reality. The ocean does not care about the unit cost of your air superiority fighters. The United States Navy operates 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers, each carrying an air wing more potent than most nations' entire air forces. These vessels cannot retreat to the safety of a harbor when hurricane season intensifies from June through November. Global power projection requires these floating cities to hold their station regardless of sea state or barometric pressure drops. The question is, how naval engineering mitigates the physics of a Category 5 hurricane bearing down on a floating runway? To understand the defense mechanisms, we must first audit the sheer value density concentrated on the flight deck. A modern Nimitz-class carrier is an $8.5 billion infrastructure project designed to endure catastrophic damage. The newer Gerald R. Ford class escalates that capital commitment to over $13 billion per hull. Yet the carrier is merely the delivery system. The payload is the carrier air wing, the CVW, parked topside. The deck hosts a mix of F/A-18 Super Hornets, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes, and the 5th generation F-35C Lightning II. The F-35C alone commands a price tag of roughly $100 million per unit, depending on the production lot. When you aggregate the air wing, the total value sitting on the non-skid surface exceeds $5 billion. Every square foot of the flight deck is optimized for sortie generation, not necessarily for long-term storm storage. The hangar bay, located 2 decks below, offers the only true shelter from wind shear and corrosive salt spray. This internal garage measures 110 feet wide by 685 feet long, spanning 2/3 of the ship. It is a hardened steel sanctuary protected by massive sliding ballistic doors that segment the bay into distinct zones. These zonal divisions are engineered to contain conflagrations and prevent a hull breach from flooding the entire deck. However, physical geometry dictates that the hangar bay can only accommodate approximately 60% of the air wing. During high-tempo combat operations, the majority of the strike aircraft must remain staged on the exposed flight deck. When a weather front approaches, the carrier strike group initiates a complex sequence of damage control protocols. This is not a reactive panic. It is a calculated transition from flight operations to heavy weather lockdown. The first line of defense is the aircraft structure itself, specifically the reinforced tie-down points on the landing gear. These are not generic tow hooks. They are hardened steel loops integrated directly into the airframe's primary load-bearing members. Engineers designed these hardpoints to withstand vertical and lateral G-forces that would rip a civilian airliner apart. To secure the aircraft, the Navy utilizes the TD-1B chain assembly, a standardized system of tension and release. Each chain link weighs roughly 15 pounds and is forged to withstand a working load limit of 10,000 pounds. The braking strength of these assemblies is rated significantly higher, often exceeding 16,000 pounds of force. Under normal calm sea conditions, standard procedure dictates a 4-point tie-down configuration for each fixed-wing asset. As the sea state rises and pitch limits exceed operational norms, the heavy weather bill is enacted immediately. The requirement escalates to 12, 14, or even 20 chains per aircraft, depending on the specific platform weight. Heavier assets like the E-2D Hawkeye or the EA-18G Growler require exponentially more securing force due to their surface area. These chains anchor into pad eyes, steel stars welded flush into the flight deck in a grid pattern. A single carrier deck contains thousands of these pad eyes, creating a universal mesh for securing cargo anywhere. But steel chains are useless without the biological machinery required to apply them, the flight deck crew. These sailors operate in a color-coded hierarchy that turns chaos into a functioning industrial ballet. Yellow shirts serve as the directors, orchestrating the movement of 70 tons of aluminum and composite materials. Blue shirts are the muscle, the chocks and chains teams responsible for physically locking the aircraft to the ship. One loose turnbuckle or one degraded chain link during a storm can trigger a multi-million-dollar domino effect. The margin for error in a Sea State 6 environment is functionally zero when dealing with unchocked wheels. We saw this reality manifest in the Truman incident. A brake failure combined with insufficient lashings led to disaster. The investigation revealed that gravity is a relentless auditor of procedural compliance and mechanical integrity. The hangar bay serves as the carrier's internal aortic valve, a massive volume located directly beneath the flight deck's armored box. During heavy weather transitions, the air boss initiates a strategic migration of high-value assets into this protected steel sanctuary. Accessibility is the bottleneck. The only route down is via 4 massive aluminum alloy aircraft elevators positioned at the deck edge. Each hydraulic lift is an engineering marvel, capable of lowering 2 74,000-pound fighters simultaneously against gravity. In high sea states, operating these elevators becomes a calculus of timing against the violent roll and pitch of the vessel. A synchronized failure here leaves half the air wing stranded topside, fully exposed to the ravages of the approaching storm. Once inside the bay, the environment shifts from chaotic wind shear to a controlled, claustrophobic industrial fortress. This space is protected by an overhead aqueous film-forming foam, AFFF, suppression system designed for catastrophic events. The system utilizes a mixture of 94% seawater and 6% foam concentrate to smother hydrocarbon fires. While effective against burning jet fuel, accidental activation during storm prep creates a maintenance nightmare for avionics. Saltwater intrusion into modern electronic bays is as destructive as fire, instantly corroding delicate gold-plated connectors. Therefore, crews must rigorously secure every canopy and access panel before the first wave crashes over the bow. The hangar design itself incorporates passive defense mechanisms through heavy compartmentalization protocols. Massive steel conflagration doors, running on deck tracks, isolate the bay into 3 or 4 independent armored zones. These barriers serve a dual purpose, containing potential infernos and providing structural rigidity against hull torsion. Historically, this compartmentalization has saved ships from total loss during combat damage and severe weather incidents. Yet, simple geometry dictates the harsh reality of finite volume. Not every aircraft fits inside the garage. The carrier's internal capacity is capped, forcing a ruthless triage of asset preservation based on mission criticality. The Stealth F-35Cs and mission-critical E-2D Hawkeyes receive priority berthing in the safety of the hangar. The older Super Hornets and robust support helicopters are often designated to ride out the storm on the exposed roof. This leads to the most visually intense phase of fleet operations, the topside storm configuration. Picture the flight deck as winds gust toward 40 knots and green water begins to spray 60 feet vertical. The first geometric adaptation is the wing fold, a mechanical necessity engineered into naval aircraft since the 1940s. An F-A-18's wingspan contracts from 40 feet down to 27 feet via hydraulic actuators and locking pins. This 30% reduction in footprint is the only reason a carrier can sustain a localized air superiority force. On a pitching deck, this folding mechanism shifts the aircraft's center of gravity, requiring immediate external stabilization. Crews rush to install jury struts, physical braces that lock the folded wings to prevent them from snapping under load. Without these struts, the violent rolling of the ship could fatigue the wing hinges to the point of catastrophic failure. Once folded, the aircraft are packed into a storm spotting arrangement, nose to tail, tighter than a civilian traffic jam. This density is deliberate. Grouped aircraft break the wind stream and allow for mutual tie-down weaving patterns. The blue shirts deploy heavy chains in a specific cross pattern, forward, aft, port, and starboard simultaneously. This X pattern creates opposing tension, ensuring that if the jet tries to slide left, the right chain pulls tighter. It is a system of dynamic tension that turns the aircraft and the deck into a single, unified, rigid body. Every turnbuckle is tightened by hand, then inspected, then verified again by a quality assurance petty officer. There is no slack allowed. A loose chain in a hurricane acts like a hammer, shock-loading the airframe with every wave impact. A veteran boatswain's mate described the sensation as chaining down a bucking bull that costs more than a hospital. The historical precedent for these draconian measures was written in blood during Typhoon Cobra in December 1944. The Third Fleet sailed directly into a tropical cyclone, resulting in the loss of 3 destroyers and 146 aircraft. Planes were ripped from their tie-downs, smashing into each other and igniting fires that doomed the light carriers. A young Gerald Ford, serving aboard the USS Monterey, fought these fires and nearly washed overboard into the Philippine Sea. The Monterey survived, but the structural damage and loss of life forced a complete rewrite of naval storm doctrine. Today's heavy weather bill is a direct descendant of the lessons learned in that terrifying crucible of 1944. But securing the cargo is only half the equation. The vessel itself must actively fight the ocean's energy. Modern supercarriers do not passively float. They engage active stabilization systems to counteract the sea. The Gerald R. Ford class utilizes advanced active fin stabilizers, massive retractable wings extending from the hull underwater. These fins operate like aircraft ailerons, pivoting to generate lift that opposes the rolling motion of the ship. Gyroscopes feed real-time roll data to hydraulic rams, adjusting the fin angle milliseconds before the ship tilts. It is effectively an active suspension system for a 100,000-ton displacement fortress. This technology reduces roll amplitude significantly, keeping the flight deck level enough to prevent chain failures. Without this active intervention, the rhythmic rolling could snap even the strongest steel alloy chains through metal fatigue. Beyond active machinery, the fundamental physics of the hull design serves as the passive fail-safe against capsizing. To the untrained eye, a carrier looks precariously top-heavy, a floating skyscraper that should topple in a breeze. However, naval architects engineer a critical relationship between the center of gravity and the center of buoyancy. The Nimitz and Ford class hulls feature a wide, flat bottom that maximizes the waterplane area. When the ship rolls to one side, the center of buoyancy shifts dramatically outward in the direction of the tilt. This geometric shift creates a massive righting arm, a lever of force that physically pushes the ship back to vertical. The further the carrier tips, the stronger this invisible hand pushes back, up to a critical angle of vanishing stability. It is a self-correcting hydrostatic equation solved continuously by the ocean itself. But stability is not merely about surviving the tilt. It is about maintaining a platform capable of launching weapons. To achieve this, the ship does not simply ride the waves, it actively attacks the weather geometry. The standing order during cyclonic activity is to maneuver the vessel's bow directly into the wind and swell. This is Survival Protocol Alpha. Minimize the surface area exposed to the lateral force of the waves. Taking a 50-foot rogue wave broadside exposes thousands of square feet of hull to millions of pounds of impact pressure. Taking that same wave on the reinforced steel bow splits the energy and forces the water to flow harmlessly aft. Furthermore, steaming into the wind reduces the relative wind speed experienced by the aircraft parked on deck. If the storm winds are blowing south at 80 knots and the carrier steams south at 20 knots, the net wind over deck drops to 60. It is a vector subtraction game played with a 100,000-ton chessboard. This constant maneuvering requires an endless reservoir of torque and propulsion reliability. This is where the nuclear advantage creates a strategic chasm between the U.S. Navy and every other maritime power. Conventional diesel-powered carriers must conserve fuel, limiting their speed and ability to outrun weather systems. A Nimitz-class carrier is powered by 2 A4W nuclear reactors, while the Ford class utilizes the advanced A1B plant. These reactors generate steam for 4 massive turbines, delivering over 260,000 shaft horsepower. They can maintain a top speed in excess of 30 knots indefinitely, regardless of the drag coefficient of the storm. The captain does not need to calculate fuel burn rates or schedule a tanker rendezvous in the middle of a typhoon. He has effectively infinite range and power to position the ship at the optimal heading for days or weeks. This energy independence allows the ship to power through the dangerous semicircle of a hurricane to find safer waters. Command and control of this Leviathan shifts to the bridge, which becomes a fused sensor data center. The officer of the deck, OOD, monitors a digital dashboard, integrating inputs from radar, sonar, and satellite feeds. They are not guessing the weather, they are dissecting it with military-grade meteorological tools. The Navy employs a dedicated METOC, meteorology, and oceanography officer, whose sole job is to predict the ocean's violence. They utilize the WEX weather forecast system, receiving real-time data bursts from shore-based supercomputers. But the most critical data comes from the Hurricane Hunters, the WC-130J aircraft flying directly into the eye wall. In 2024, these brave crews flew over 900 hours inside Category 5 storms to feed data to the fleet. This look-ahead capability allows the carrier strike group to alter course 48 hours before the sea state becomes critical. Yet, even with perfect data, communication breakdowns can turn a managed risk into a casualty event. The investigation into the 2022 Truman incident cited a specific failure in the information chain. The bridge initiated a hard tactical turn while the hangar bay crew was still securing a movement operation. The centrifugal force of the turn, combined with the ship's roll, overcame the friction of the unsecured aircraft. Physics punishes a lack of synchronization instantly. There is no pause button to clarify orders. To prevent this, Condition 1 sets a watertight integrity posture throughout the entire vessel. Every hatch, scuttle, and watertight door is dogged down, effectively turning the ship into a sealed honeycomb. This prevents progressive flooding, where water from one damaged compartment cascades into the next, sinking the ship. On the flight deck, the battle against water accumulation is fought by scuppers, the drainage arteries of the ship. If water pools on the deck, it creates a free surface effect, a sloshing liquid mass that destabilizes the vessel. A few inches of water across a 4-acre deck weighs hundreds of tons, shifting wildly with every roll. The scuppers must remain clear of debris to evacuate this liquid load instantly back into the ocean. But the threat environment is rarely singular. Storms often coincide with combat requirements. In the Red Sea deployment of 2024, the USS Eisenhower and Truman faced Houthi drone swarms during gale conditions. The crew had to execute emergency breakaways to dodge anti-ship ballistic missiles while waves crashed over the bow. This is the ultimate stress test, securing a jet for a hurricane while launching it to intercept a supersonic threat. The specific deployment of the USS Harry S. Truman saw the loss of 3 F/A-18 Super Hornets in a 6-month window. These losses were not singular events, but a convergence of high-tempo combat stress and environmental hostility. One airframe was lost in a friendly fire incident, a chaotic reality of modern drone warfare defense. Another fell from the hangar bay during evasive maneuvering, the direct result of the physics we analyzed earlier. The third crashed due to a catastrophic arresting gear failure, snapping the cable that separates a safe landing from a swim. Navy investigations later pinpointed substandard maintenance practices and crew fatigue as critical contributing factors. When you operate billion-dollar assets in a combat zone during hurricane season, the margin for error evaporates. This brings us to the smallest, yet most critical component of the storm defense system, the deck tie-down fitting. These cross-shaped steel pockets are welded directly into the flight deck, numbering in the thousands. They live in a torture chamber of saltwater spray, jet exhaust, and constant mechanical abrasion. Corrosion is the silent enemy here. A rusted fitting cannot guarantee the 16,000-pound vertical load capacity. The Navy replaces hundreds of these fittings annually, cutting them out of the deck steel in a spark-heavy surgery. Recent engineering proposals have sought advanced alloys resistant to the galvanic corrosion caused by the ocean environment. Every single fitting is subject to rigorous load testing cycles to verify its structural integrity. The day a sailor skips that inspection is the day a $70 million jet snaps its tether during a squall. This leads us to the human element, the sailors who physically execute these protocols under duress. The average age of a flight deck crew member is barely 22 years old, yet they shoulder immense responsibility. In the Persian Gulf, deck temperatures exceed 120 degrees. In the North Atlantic, wind chill freezes skin instantly. Yet they must move 30-ton aircraft on a pitching surface that is constantly covered in oil, grease, and water. Order is maintained through the strict visual hierarchy of the rainbow wardrobe, the color-coded jersey system. Yellow shirts are the aircraft directors, the conductors who alone have the authority to move the metal. Blue shirts are the aircraft handlers, the grunts who lug the 40-pound chains and physically secure the wheels. Green shirts operate the catapults and arresting gear, the machinery that launches and recovers the violence. Red shirts are the ordnance men, handling live bombs and missiles, often strapping them on during heavy rain. Purple shirts, affectionately called grapes, handle the aviation fuel lines, pumping volatile JP-5 jet fuel. Brown shirts are the plane captains, responsible for the individual maintenance and readiness of a specific jet. White shirts serve as the safety observers and quality control, the final eyes before a launch or lockdown. During storm preparation, these distinct tribes merge into a single, synchronized damage control organism. The airboss commands this chaos from primary flight control, a glass tower overlooking the entire deck. But the real chess game happens in flight deck control, managed by the handler using the Ouija board. This is a 1:192 scale physical replica of the flight deck, covered in movable plastic templates of every aircraft. It is an analog computer in a digital age, used because it never crashes, never hacks, and needs no electricity. The handler moves a plastic F-18 on the board, and a yellow shirt moves the real $70 million jet on deck. Blue shirts swarm the landing gear immediately, attaching chains before the pilot even shuts down the engines. Final checkers sprint from plane to plane, physically pulling on chains to verify tension and angle. This choreography is not improvised. It is drilled relentlessly during calm seas until muscle memory takes over. New sailors are mentored by hardened chiefs who have weathered Atlantic hurricanes and Pacific typhoons. The institutional knowledge is passed down verbally, a collection of sea stories that serve as survival warnings. They know that the procedures in the heavy weather bill were written in the blood of sailors from 1944. In a real storm, there is no time for debate. You execute the lockdown, or you watch your shipmates die. What happens when the storm finally breaks? The carrier doesn't just resume operations, it begins the post-event assessment. Every single aircraft must be inspected for salt intrusion, particularly in the engine intakes and sensor bays. Salt crystals are hygroscopic. They attract water and eat through aluminum alloys and wiring insulation. Maintenance crews open every panel, flushing systems with fresh water and applying corrosion prevention compounds. Aircraft that rode out the storm topside receive the highest priority for deep cycle structural inspection. The flight deck itself is scrutinized. Did the tie-down points stretch? Did the non-skid surface delaminate? Catapults and arresting gear engines are test-fired with dead loads to ensure the storm didn't warp the tracks. No aircraft launches until every system is verified, signed off, and countersigned by department heads. This rapid return to lethality is what separates the U.S. Navy from a coastal defense force. Despite losing aircraft and battling storms, the Truman Air Wing continued to strike targets in the Middle East without pause. Operational readiness comes with a staggering invoice: the Refueling and Complex Overhaul, or RCOH. This midlife modernization for a Nimitz-class carrier burns through $2.6 billion. It removes the ship from the line for 4 years, a gap in global coverage that must be managed strategically. During this period, storm damage systems are stripped to the keel and rebuilt with next-generation materials. Tie-down grids are rewelded, and weather monitoring radars are upgraded to track storms with higher fidelity. The new Ford-class carriers incorporate these hard-learned lessons directly into their initial blueprints. They feature improved stability control software and hangar bays designed with better flow for rapid lockdowns. When we compare this to peer competitors, the disparity in heavy weather capability becomes glaring. The People's Liberation Army Navy of China currently operates 2 carriers, with a third fitting out. However, their operational doctrine is still in its infancy compared to 6 decades of American experience. Russia clings to a single aging carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, which travels with its own ocean-going tugboat. The Kuznetsov is plagued by mechanical reliability issues that make storm avoidance a matter of survival, not tactics. The United Kingdom's Queen Elizabeth class represents a modern capability, utilizing a ski jump ramp design. But the ski jump imposes strict physics limitations when launching heavy aircraft in high sea states. This is where the American Catobar system, catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery, reigns supreme. Steam or electromagnetic catapults provide a deterministic force, accelerating a jet to 150 knots regardless of wind. A ski jump relies on the aircraft's own thrust and a ballistic arc, which is dangerous when the deck is pitching violently. If the bow dips down at the moment of launch on a ski jump, the aircraft's trajectory is aimed directly at the waves. An American catapult shoots the aircraft horizontally, providing a larger safety margin against vertical deck movement. Furthermore, the U.S. recovery system uses 4 steel arresting wires to trap aircraft. These engines can stop a 50,000-pound jet traveling at 150 miles per hour in 2 seconds. This capability is maintained even when the fantail of the ship is heaving 20 feet vertically. The landing signal officers, LSOs, control this chaos, waving off approaches if the deck geometry becomes mathematically impossible. Another often overlooked advantage is the design of the hangar bay enclosure itself. During World War II, British carriers favored armored decks with enclosed hangars, while Americans favored open sides. Modern U.S. supercarriers have evolved to a hybrid, fully enclosed steel shutters that seal the ship hermetically. This protects the air wing from the corrosive salt spray that eats into the stealth coatings of the F-35. Fire protection within these spaces is sophisticated enough to distinguish between a combat fire and a maintenance spark. But the ultimate strategic trump card remains the propulsion source: nuclear fission. Conventional carriers like the Queen Elizabeth or China's Shandong require massive fuel bunkers for propulsion. Navigating around a massive typhoon requires high-speed transits that burn fuel at an exponential rate. A conventional ship might run low on fuel while trying to outrun a storm, forcing a dangerous replenishment at sea. Refueling from a tanker in 20-foot seas is a nautical nightmare that risks collision and environmental disaster. A nuclear carrier has no such tether. It can steam at 30 knots for 20 years without stopping. This allows the captain to choose the longest, safest route around a weather system without checking the gas gauge. Freedom of movement is the ultimate defensive layer against the unpredictability of the ocean. The U.S. Navy has operated supercarriers in every ocean and every weather condition imaginable since 1961. That institutional memory is encoded in every checklist, every manual, and every senior chief petty officer. You cannot buy this experience. You can only earn it through decades of exposure to the elements. It is the difference between a theoretical capability and a combat-proven system. The question originally posed was how we prevent billions of dollars from becoming ocean debris. The answer is a multi-layered system of systems, engineered with redundant safety margins. It starts with the metallurgy of a 15-pound chain and ends with the uranium atoms splitting in the reactor. It relies on the kid from Kansas, wearing a blue shirt, to tension a turnbuckle correctly in the driving rain. It relies on the meteorologist in the windowless room predicting the path of a cyclone 3 days out. And it relies on the naval architect who decided to put the center of buoyancy higher than the center of gravity. Skip any one of these steps, ignore any one of these layers, and the ocean wins. The July 2022 incident on the Truman was a warning shot, a reminder that complacency is fatal. But the fact that it was a rare anomaly, rather than a common occurrence, proves the system works. In a world of increasing climatic instability, these floating airfields remain the most survivable platforms ever built. As we look toward the 2030 horizon, the definition of heavy weather is being rewritten by the climate itself. Naval oceanographers are tracking a statistical increase in rapid intensification events, where tropical depressions become major hurricanes overnight. The carrier fleets of the future will not just endure storms, they will operate in a hypervolatile atmospheric baseline. This escalation coincides with a fundamental shift in the composition of the carrier air wing, the rise of the machines. The introduction of the MQ-25 Stingray, the Navy's first carrier-based unmanned refueling drone, introduces new securing variables. Unlike a Hornet with a pilot who can hold the brakes during a deck slide, a drone is dead weight until chained. The algorithms guiding these autonomous assets must include storm logic to position themselves safely without human intervention. Future deck crews might be securing aircraft that have no cockpit, no canopy, and no human inside to verify the brakes. Yet, the strategic imperative remains absolute. The United States carrier cannot leave the region just because the barometer drops. If a U.S. carrier strike group retreats from the South China Sea to avoid a typhoon, it creates a geopolitical vacuum. Adversaries do not take days off for weather. Therefore, the deterrent force cannot afford to either. This creates a paradox. To protect the asset, you must risk the asset. The $4 billion of aircraft on deck are not just machines. They are the currency of global influence. When a president asks, "Where are the carriers?" he is asking where his options are. Those options only exist if the chains hold, if the stabilizers articulate, and if the crew performs. The engineering we have dissected today, from the 15-pound chain to the nuclear reactor, is the physical manifestation of that political will. It is a system built on the assumption that nature will try to kill you, and the enemy will try to exploit that struggle. The fact that the U.S. Navy has not lost a carrier to weather since 1945 is a testament to this obsessive preparation. But history is a brutal teacher. It only takes one loose chain link to turn a statistic into a tragedy. The ocean is patient, infinite, and indifferent to the replacement cost of an F-35. Survival is not a guarantee. It is a daily operational achievement paid for in sweat and vigilance. As we close the book on carrier storm operations, remember that these ships are not just floating airports. They are sovereign territory, sovereign power, and sovereign capability, held together by steel and grit. The next time you see a headline about a hurricane, think of the 5,000 souls riding it out in the middle of the Atlantic. They are the ones standing between the storm and the strategic stability of the world. If this deep dive into naval engineering and extreme weather operations gave you a new perspective, authorize that like button. The algorithm, much like a carrier landing, requires precision. Your subscription helps us land the next video. We have barely scratched the paint on the complexities of modern naval warfare. From submarine hunter-killer logic to the thermodynamics of hypersonic missiles, there is more to declassify. Check the description for sources on the Truman incident and technical diagrams of the tie-down systems discussed. This channel explores the machinery of power without the filter of mainstream simplification. We don't just tell you what happened, we show you the physics of why it happened. Your engagement dictates our next mission profile. Drop a comment. Would you trust a computer to land a drone on a pitching deck in a Category 5 storm? Or does the human loop remain the ultimate failsafe in a chaotic environment? Until next time, keep your head on a swivel and your chains tight. This is the reality of operating at the tip of the spear, where the only thing more dangerous than the enemy is the water beneath the keel. End of transmission.